Hey guys, Alex Spencer here at the Atom Audio headquarters in Nashville, Tennessee. We just did a session with April Kry, who came in and did a couple Christmas songs as well as an original. We're going to dive into her original song called I Feel at Home. It was an unbelievable performance. It was just acoustic guitar with a vocal. I know a lot of folks out there may struggle with getting a large, rich, warm sound out of just a couple of sources, like a vocal and an acoustic guitar. So we're going to kind of look at some ways that that can be done. Hopefully something that you guys can bring into your sessions as you do acoustic and vocal sessions. I do need to throw the caveat out there that the microphones have a lot to do with how warm and full your session will sound. So Blackbird Rentals was nice enough to hook us up with a nice tube U47, a vintage one for the guitar, and then a nice vintage U67 for April's vocal, so that certainly helped a lot. The rest of the chain behind those, we had the acoustic guitar was a U47 going into an Undertone Audio MPDI4 preamp, and then we went out of that into a Retro 176 compressor, and then straight into Pro Tools. April's vocal was on the U67. That also went into an Undertone Audio MPDI4 preamp, and then that went into the Great River Harrison 32 EQ 500 module, and then that went into a Retro double wide for just a little bit of compression. Very slow on the attack and very fast on the release, just to kind of bring up the tail end of April's vocal just a little bit. So let's take a peek just at the beginning of the song. As usually happens when you start mixing a song, the most important thing to do is to get the vibe of the song. So I'm actually going to take the reverb off, and let's just listen to the vocal and the guitar.
I feel home in your t-shirt with my feet up on the beat-up old sofa. Close all the curtains, little bourbon in my Coca-Cola. There's nothing like a little summer rain and some old vinyl crackling. Something about the way they did it back then. I feel at home. Never ever felt so comfortable. When you pull me close, I'm safe and warm. No one does it, baby, like you do. So perfect, so true and familiar. 'Cause boy, when I'm with you, I feel at home.
Cool. So right off the bat, we can tell that her vocal as well as the guitar are going to be really dynamic throughout the song. Rather than rely a lot on compression to kind of level things out, I like to use clip gain to my advantage. Clip gain, of course, is any sort of amplitude modulation before any of your plugins. So the more that you're able to utilize clip gain, the easier it is and the more transparent that any of your processing in Pro Tools is going to sound. So the first thing that I did going through here was just kind of a glance over. I mean, we've got the verse and pre-chorus section, and then we've got a chorus section here. So the chorus section, I brought the guitar down a little bit because it's already being played harder. Did the same in the next couple of sections where the guitar is playing a little harder. So making the rhythm behind her vocal not as dynamic so that I can have her vocal be the more dynamic part in this. A huge part of this is keeping in mind that not everybody is listening on our S3Hs or our S5Vs and maybe listening on earbuds or just out of their phone. So you want to have some leveling off so that you don't have the risk of people not hearing things or the risk of overloading those transducers on the way out. So after doing some basic guitar writing, we went in and did just a little bit of guitar processing. The guitar sounded great by itself coming out. We had a DI on it as well. So something that I like to do when I have 2 tracks for the same source that may be arriving at different times in the timeline, like a DI for the guitar and the guitar mic, is on the source that is coming into the timeline first, like in this case, the DI, which we can see if we zoom in on these 2 tracks right here. The top green track there is our mic, the bottom green track there is our DI. The DI is receiving, or Pro Tools is receiving the DI signal before it is the mic signal. So on that DI, we're going to throw the basic time adjuster plugin, and then we're going to zoom in and find a couple of zero crossing points. So we want to line this guy up with that zero crossing point right there. So by putting our timeline in samples, boom, we can look at the length of that region that I just selected, and that's 9 samples. So with the time adjuster plugin, I've got it on 10, we can throw that to 9. 9 samples. Now I've delayed the DI signal by 9 samples, so it's perfectly in line with the microphone. So if we were to disengage that, it's going to be a very slight difference, but you may hear what we're talking about here. We'll solo these tracks. You can just feel it pulls the guitar more forward and levels everything off and makes it feel more firm as an instrument as opposed to a very slight amount of phasing going on. So in addition to the little time adjuster trick there, I threw a few more processing items on this guitar. I wanted to fill it out just a little more. And the best way I find to do that is very minimal EQ, very minimal compression, and harmonic saturation. So looking at our chain for that guitar, if we need some harmonic saturation and some nice beef to it, my go-to is UA's 1073 copy. By doing a low cut here, we're able to clean up some of the nonsense underneath, but then add a little bit of that warmth on the bottom end back with the shelf filter that we have here. Not doing anything in the mid-range, well, maybe just a tiny dip at 1600 hertz just to make a little bit of room for the vocal. And then I added a lot of top end here. Not a lot of top end. I added a little bit of top end here on the high shelf. It brings out that sheen without getting overly aggressive and nasty. The SSL style of EQ can do that too, but I just prefer everything about the 1073 high-end shelf. When you need that sheen, it's the perfect thing to use. The next item that we threw on here is the, again, UAD doing their 176 compressor. I fell in love with the hardware version of this compressor. When they decided to come out with a software version, I was thrilled. Very, very minimal compression going on this. So it's kind of thin. I mean, we're hearing a lot of that 1073, that top end that I added. So by throwing the 176 under, we kind of smooth it out. Like we feel that like 300 to 600 a lot more. It's got more body to it. Then after that, we went in and did a little further EQ, not a bunch, using the Neve 88RS, just some more top end and a little bit of a cut in that muddy range, the 250 to 300 range, a little bit of adding some mid-range body to it in the 700, and that's about it. We're not going over the top with it. We're kind of just making it fit. Oxford Inflator does a great job of bringing out that richness in like the 125 to 500 range, just that warmth down there. So just a little bit of that effect. And then the distressor at the back end, again, we're just bringing up a little bit on the bottom end, even so little that I engage the peak mode, which you would think would do next to nothing on an acoustic guitar. But again, harmonic content, very minimal compression, EQ to make it fit with the vocal. That's kind of all I'm looking for in here. this guitar lacked a little bit of bottom end. We found that bottom end with the Oxford inflator and the low filter on the Neve 1073, and it feels good. We can do that classic little test of disengaging everything and then re-engaging everything again so that we can hear incrementally how we are changing our sound. Great, so that's the acoustic guitar in this. Let's take a peek at the vocal though and see where the bread and butter of this whole thing lies. So we got it captured in here, and I'm sure you guys are looking at it going, wow, they did a lot of punches. We did not do any punches. This was a one-take wonder on this. I just happened to go through and clean up with a lot of clip gain. I like to use compression on vocals, and I'll bet that you do too. You don't want to overdo it necessarily, especially with something that's this fragile acoustic with a vocal, intimate feeling. So you can get away with doing a lot of clip gain automation to clean things up. So going in, scrolling through, we're looking at almost a word-by-word clip gain approach. The most important thing to me when I'm approaching clip gain is trying to get rid of or mitigate the plosives and the S's and the T's, the K's, all of those sounds that if you were to brighten up a vocal a lot, really come out and stab. De-essers are wonderful, they work very well, but they can be overused and end up sounding unnatural. So when I'm approaching a vocal like this and doing the clip gain automation, big focus on those little, I don't want to say imperfections, but just those realities of recorded vocals. If I were to take all of those S's and T's and K's down as much as, 6 or 7 dB, then I can really turn up the top end on the vocal and not have those come through as being really overwhelming, and I don't have to rely heavily on de-essers that can sound unnatural. And then also took some of the big moments and made them a little smaller so that there was a little less dynamic range overall, because again, remembering our audience here, we're trying to essentially feed the person that's listening on their phone. So we gotta reduce the dynamic range a little bit, but still have it sound open and natural. In addition to that, it's a very similar approach as with the acoustic guitar. We're looking for minimal compression and a lot of harmonic saturation to fill out whatever we need. So we've got a pretty simple chain on this one. I've just got the stock de-esser on. You hit the listen tab and you filter through.
When I see your face, I feel it. Oh.
There's a nice S right there. So you guys know how a de-esser works. You zero in on where the S sounds kind of play out with the frequency dial, and then I'll bring the range down to a whopping 1/10 of a dB, and we'll just take just a tiny bit off the top. If I did my job correctly with using clip gain, then this this de-esser should do very little at all.
My soul comes alive when I see your face. I feel it.
So after the stock de-esser, which is doing a fine job of taking very little off the top, I went for the FABFILTER Pro Multiband. This thing is amazing. This happened to be one of those circumstances where, despite the fact that a lot of folks will tell you to throw a preset on and then modify it to what you need, I threw a preset on and it sounded pretty good just the way it was, so I left it as the preset. So the preset we ended up with was single vocal enhancement. Sounds great by itself, so you can kind of see how much it's reacting right there. It's doing a decent amount of work right there.
I feel
And especially with vocals, using a multiband is a great way to get some separation and the illusion of dynamics within your track. This thing's awesome. Recommend using it. All the FABFILTER stuff is phenomenal. We'll see some more of it later on. Followed that up with a little trick of stacking a couple of distressors behind it. So I know that we already saw the UAD distressor on the guitar. That distressor is phenomenal. However, in the interest of saving on some processing power, I really like the SLATE digital one as well. It sounds absolutely wonderful. They did a great job on it. And by stacking two of them in a row, you can kind of get this interesting effect where if the first one is doing a really slow attack and a really fast release, you're going to bring up the tail end of every segment, of every phrase that's sung. And if the other one is doing a quick attack and a quick release, then you can kind of taper off the very beginning of each phrase that's being sung. So by doing that, you're taking the very intro of any phrase and bringing it down in dynamic while expanding the back end, helping to further level out and beef out our vocal. So we can kind of see the gain reduction going on this. It's not a lot, but if they're working about together, then you know you've got it dialed really well.
So comfortable.
So that was dialed in, and the last thing that I felt that I wanted on this was a little bit of richness in the upper mid-range. And UA came out with this V76 that on their line level setting just does exactly that. Sounds absolutely awesome. I didn't touch very much on this, just messed a little bit with the threshold on the compressor side of it, didn't want to hit it too hard, and pretty much called it done from there. So I would have, the workflow that we would have done here on the vocal is start with doing some clip gain, add in the plug-in chain, get the sonic texture right, and then go back to the clip gain so that we're not over-compressing in any particular place. Then the big caveat that we threw in on this vocal here. It sounded great in the box, but we've got a Focusrite Red 3 sitting over here that was kind of just made for this style of vocal. So kicked that vocal out to the Red 3, did just a little bit of compression, got all that awesome top-end richness out of the Red 3, and then put it back into Pro Tools. So that's this track down here that you see called Vox Print. So we've got all of this processing. We got the clip gain running through these plugins over here, and then we're dumping that through the Red 3, and that's showing back up on Vox Print. So let me unsolo this one, mute that, and listen to the final vocal that we ended up on I Feel at Home.
Nothing like a little summer rain and some old vinyl crackling. Something about the way they did it back then.
We're not trying to overdo it with any one thing in particular. We're trying to do just a little bit with a whole bunch of different things. That's a little taxing on your system, but if it sounds good, then it is good, right? We've got that for our final vocal print. Anytime that you're doing a hardware print back into the system, you want to make sure you zoom way in, find a good zero crossing point, and realign from your original to your print back track. That way your phasing is completely perfect and you haven't changed anything by going out to some hardware. So the last element to add into this session would have been a touch of reverb. Reverb is everything when you're doing a vocal and guitar, especially in a studio setting. If you're doing like a from your living room kind of vibe, you can add reverb if you want to. It depends on what you're going for. For us here, we're going for the studio vibe, so let's pick a really great reverb or two to throw on that vocal, put a little bit of that on the guitar as well, and see if that just fills it out and gives it that body that we want. Makes the artist feel good, and makes us feel good too, and look good. So 2 of my staple reverbs are on this session. I can't take that much credit for them, but again, Universal Audio, their EMT 140 is absolutely phenomenal. I ended up doing the C plate on this, which is a little different from the norm. Wanted to try something different. I like the A plate a lot, but I did the C plate with the low cut at that first notch there, little bit of pre-delay, brought the delay time down to about 2 seconds. That seems to be a nice sweet spot. That's kind of a very orchestral time in there. So that's what we've got for the EMT 140. And then we've got the Capital Chambers, which these things are possibly the best sounding digital reverb I've ever heard in my life. So by having both of these come off of the same send, so I have bus 1 and 2 here on the vocal, I have that as well on the guitar. If I have too much of one of the reverbs, I simply grab the volume fader for that reverb and bring it down. Is it technically the most perfect gain staging possible? Maybe not, but for these purposes, it works great. If it sounds good, it is good. So let's throw in some reverb.
Ooh, I feel home in your t-shirt.
Let's throw on the 140.
Up on the beat up old sofa. Close all the curtains, little bourbon in my Coca-Cola.
So this has got the distance on it, but it doesn't have the lushness that we can get out of a chamber.
Some rain and some old vinyl crackling. Something about the way they did it back then. I feel it whole. Never ever felt so comfortable. When you pull me close, I'm safe and whoa. No one does it, baby, like you do. So perfect, so true and familiar. 'Cause boy, when I'm with you, I feel at home.
All right, so now it's lush, it's full, it's got that depth to it. If I felt like we wanted to bring more of that lushness forward towards us, we could add some harmonic backing behind one or both of these reverbs. So let's take the chamber and go ahead and throw a culture vulture behind it, which is probably about the last thing you would expect someone to throw behind a reverb.
It's like when I hear a church choir singing.
But let's check it out.
Grace, my soul comes alive.
Let's go back to a more of an intimate moment there to see how much this is going to change things. So the culture vulture is going to bring essentially distortion in behind that chamber reverb. But the chamber reverb is so lush and so far back there that it kind of accentuates it in a really glorious way without having it sound, you know, it's all bright. It's the last thing it's going to sound is dark.
Ooh, I feel home in your t-shirt with my feet up on the beat up old sofa.
It is definitely there now.
Close all the curtains, little bourbon in my Coca-Cola. There's nothing like a little summer rain and some old vinyl crackling. Something about the way they did it back then. I feel it whole. Never ever felt so comfortable. When you pull me close, I'm safe and whoa. No one does it, baby, like you do. So perfect, so true and familiar. 'Cause boy, when I'm with you, I feel at home.
So this is the part where I say that the most important part of your selection of tools is their vibe as opposed to what they actually do. If it's got the right vibe, then you're picking it for the right choice. You don't always have to open a plug-in and start tweaking every knob on it. If you pop it open and it sounds good right away, and it was what you were going for, then leave it on there. We didn't have a lot of tracks here. We did a decent amount of processing. April put in a great take of this original song. Good mics, a good room, very vibey space. You get a good performance, add a little bit of magic on the back end, and you've got a great session. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you took a lot from this. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to reach out. Follow us here at Atom Audio, and we'll see you next time.